Hey guys, Chris Fix here, and today I'm going to show you my tips and tricks on how to check out the interior of a used car. In the first video, I showed you how to inspect a car on the side of the road with the for sale sign in the window. In the second video, I showed you what questions to ask the owner on the phone, how to figure out what the car is actually worth so you get a good deal, and how to check the VIN for free. And in the third video, I showed you how to inspect the engine. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to use my checklist to show you how to check out the interior of a car, and a little bit of the exterior too, to make sure you don't get stuck with a bad car. My checklist is available for you to download and print with the link in the description, so you can bring this along with you the next time you go check out a used car. And before we go and check out the interior, I can't cover everything in this video because the video would be hours long. So any tips and tricks that you guys have that I don't cover, make sure you comment below, because that really contributes to the video and helps everybody out. Alright, so let's get started checking out this interior. On a luxury car, the interior is one of the nicest things. It's very lush, it's very comfortable, but on any vehicle, the interior is where you're going to spend most of your time. So you want to really thoroughly inspect it and make sure that you're going to be comfortable driving this car every day. So the first thing I like to do is, you're going to be sitting in these seats every day. It's what holds you into the car. I inspect the seats. So we're going to be looking for any rips, any tears, any worn out parts of the leather, and these seats look excellent. I don't see any marks of wear and tear, especially for 130,000 miles. There is a mark right here, and that's probably from the seatbelt sliding back and forth, but I might actually be able to clean that up, maybe dye it again, might even come back with some leather conditioner. Otherwise, these seats look great. Another thing you want to check, make sure that the power seats work in all directions, because if you can't adjust your seat when you're driving, then you're going to have trouble driving the car. And a lot of times these power seats are expensive to fix, so that's just another thing you want to check. Now you're going to inspect the seats on the driver's side, but also go to the passenger side and inspect those seats. And finally, you want to go to the back and inspect the back seats. You just want to take a look around on the interior and check all the seats. The next thing I like to do is check out down by the floor mats. The floor mat area gives you a lot of information, and I have a couple of really good tips. So the first thing you want to do is you want to remove the floor mats. And you want to inspect the condition underneath the floor mats. Feel around for any water, and also hit around and feel for any soft spots. If you can, you could also go underneath the car and look up and make sure that there's no rust. A lot of times if there's a leak, water could accumulate here, get in between the carpet and the metal and cause rust, and then your floorboards are all rusty. Next, we want to look at the brake pedal and the gas pedal, because this will help us tell if the car's odometer has been rolled back. Now, it's not a definitive way to tell, but it'll help give us clues. And what you do is you look at the rubber on the brake pedal, and you want to see how worn out it is. Now in this case, we have a 130,000 mile Jaguar, and the brake pedal doesn't look that worn out. But if the guy's claiming to have a 40,000 mile car and the brake pedal looks like this, where it's worn down to the metal, well, guess what? You know that car has way more than 40,000 miles. So this is just a quick thing to look at, and it gives you some more information, and it could tip you off that the odometer's been rolled back, especially if the wear on the brake pedal or gas pedal isn't consistent with the amount of miles that the car has. So this is the driver's side. Let me show you a tip for the passenger side. Under the dash on the passenger side, you have the heater core, and if there's a heater core leak, you have to rip out this whole dash just to get to it. So one thing you want to do is you want to go underneath both floor mats in this case, and you just want to feel back here for any wet spots. This should be completely dry. And that's one thing I see a lot of people miss. They'll go check the heat and make sure the heat works, and the heat will be working, but they don't check under here for any leaks. And then eventually they'll feel, oh, why is there water under here? And they have a heater core leak and they need to get their heater core replaced. So following our sheet, the next thing we want to do is check out the trunk. Now surprisingly enough, you can learn a lot from looking at the trunk. Next, we want to go in the trunk and we want to look for any water spots, indicating that there's any leaks. And we also want to feel around and make sure that we don't feel any leaks anywhere. And another place water likes to collect is down in the spare tire well. And if we look here, it looks pretty dry. Since we're down here at the spare tire, you can make sure that the spare tire is filled with air and pumped up, and it is. We have our tow hook here, and we also have our jack and everything under here. I can see it through here. I don't want to take this all apart. But make sure you have your jack, so if you get stuck, you can put the spare tire on. Another thing is the trunk down here tells you a lot about the person. If you look here, we have a kid's toy, and the guy said he has kids. Also, if you look here, I found this module, and the guy actually told me that it's the parking sensor module, which is this over here, and this is what he thought was wrong with the parking sensors, so he replaced it, and it still doesn't work, so he doesn't know what the problem is. So that's all just by looking in the trunk. And then finally, the last thing to look at, this spare tire carrier is perfectly round, and on the sides here it's perfectly straight. In a rear end collision, when a car crumples this up, body shops aren't going to be able to pop this out and make it look perfectly good again. So if this looks indented at all and doesn't look straight and factory, and if this glue here doesn't look factory, then you might have had a serious rear end collision. So that's something you want to look for. And as I put all this stuff back in, the last thing you want to make sure is if you have locking lug nuts on your vehicle, make sure you have that lug nut key, because trying to get the tires off without that lug nut key is sometimes a pain. Alright, now comes the tedious part where having this sheet is going to help out a lot, because we have a lot of things that we need to check out. Cars these days come with tons of options. I mean, we have navigation here, heated seats, there's a sunroof up there. So we need to make sure that we check everything to see if it works or doesn't work. So let's get started checking out the interior by checking out the gauges first. I should also mention, it's a good idea to make sure that the car will lock and unlock when you hit the buttons. And the hood pops. And I don't want to hit the button for the alarm, but the alarm works. So now let's go check out the dashboard. Put the key in the ignition, turn it to the run position, but don't start the car. The check engine light, airbag light, and ABS light should all come up. You could do this a few times to make sure. You also want to make sure that any lights such as the brake light, seatbelt light, the oil light, and then, well, that's interesting right there. You can see right down there where the battery light should be is a piece of tape over the battery light. And that's because on Jaguars, there's a problem with the battery cable not allowing enough current to run through it and give enough voltage when it warms up. So a lot of people on this car put these little pieces of tape on the battery light so it doesn't show up. So it looks like all the dash lights and everything work on this car, so now I'm gonna go and start her up. Now there are tons of buttons and stuff that you should be checking. You gotta make sure all your lights work, make sure all the windows roll up and down, and then go to the navigation screen. In this case, this car is really nice. It has navigation. So make sure you check everything. We're gonna start by turning on the heated seats, make sure that they work. We're gonna go on to the audio, turn up the volume, make sure none of the speakers are crackling. And that sounds good. So you want to make sure not only does the FM work, but you want to check the AM. If you look at my sheet here, one of the things that I found on my research is that the AM radio, for some reason, goes bad on these cars. The signal doesn't work. And I can't get a channel to work. Now, I don't listen to AM that much, but this car is going to be for my father, and he does, so that's something you want to think about. And that's why you do your research, because I looked up online to see common problems with these cars, and AM radio was one of the common problems, and look at that, the radio doesn't work. So next thing you want to do is just go through and just hit all the buttons. Literally hit everything. Make sure everything's working. Test the climate control. Make sure you put it on completely cold so that we know if the air conditioning's working. Check the compressor, make sure the compressor kicks on. I heard it kick on. And then feel for the air conditioner. Already this is getting real cold, so that works, which is good. Air conditioning stuff could get expensive, so if you want to have air conditioning, make sure it works. And to check the compressor, just look for the compressor over by the belt, and it should be clicking on and off. If you look down here, you can see with the AC on, the compressor clicks on, and the outside of the pulley moves. If the compressor is clicking on, and you're not getting cold air, there's probably not enough refrigerant because of a leak. And it is okay for the compressor to kick on and off, as long as it stays on for a couple of seconds, and stays off for a couple seconds. You don't want it to be kicking on and off real quickly. Know that if the guy tells you, oh, you know, it just needs a recharge, no, the air conditioner never just needs a recharge. I promise you. If it's leaking, there's a problem. So don't fall for that, oh, it just needs a recharge for the summertime. Now we want to go down here, and we're going to turn the heat up all the way. And we just want to make sure we could feel the heat. The engine's at operating temperature, and right away, I could feel this heat blasting out. That's nice and warm, so that's good. And you just want to play with all the buttons, make sure everything works. Make sure all the screen works for the touch. We could go hit navigation, agree. You want to make sure that the navigation could find your car. And in this case, we have no problem finding our car here, so the navigation's working right. Another thing to remember are options like the sunroof. The sunroof, we're going to press the button, let's see if it works. Good, it goes all the way back. The next thing we want to do is we want to inspect around the edge of the sunroof and make sure that we don't see anything indicating that there's leaks. I don't see anything indicating there's leaks, so that's good. And then we're going to press the button and make sure that the sunroof goes all the way back and seals. Good. It's a good idea to also put the car in neutral and then check the handbrake to make sure the handbrake's working. And in this case, it is. So really check everything on the interior. Even little things that you don't think about, like the windshield washer fluid. Hit the button, make sure that it works, because even little things like that add up, and then driving around without windshield wiper fluid, you'll realize how quickly that becomes a nuisance. Now the last thing we're going to want to check out before we go for a test drive is this exterior. Now I did go over the exterior a lot where we first inspected the vehicle, but I want to show you a few extra little tips and tricks. One little trick that you want to do is you want to check the panel gaps. You want to run your finger down the panel gaps just like this and feel for any uneven panel gap. So when you start up here, it should feel the same as when you end up down here. The gap should not change size. And the same goes for this side of the car. When you start your finger up here, the panel gap should feel the same all the way down. And this side should match that side. Now you want to check the panel gaps on everything, all the doors, even check up above the door, because if you have a sagging door, the panel gap will get wider over here than it is down over there. Now this front panel gap is going to be the perfect example of a bad panel gap. If we follow the panel gap with our finger, that feels good, and I can start feeling it getting wider. Not only can I feel it getting wider, but if you look here, you can see it getting wider. And that's because our hood isn't closing all the way, because the hood latch isn't working. And then another tip I have is get one of these fridge magnets, and anywhere there's metal body panels and you think there's been body work, body filler, like Bondo, is not magnetic. So we could test to see if there's any body filler. So if you think this area right here has been damaged, just get your magnet and test around the area. Don't rub the magnet against the car, you don't want to scratch the paint, but test to make sure that the magnet is sticking, and in this case it's sticking in all these areas. And this is a good way to test for Bondo. Now I don't really care about Bondo on a car like this. This isn't an expensive car, but if you're buying an expensive car and you think you see like a little indentation, you think they might have used some Bondo there, you could check to see if there's magnetism. If there's magnetism and you have a steel body panel, then they didn't use Bondo. But if you lose magnetism, then that means that they have a layer of Bondo on here. But again, be careful, because not every panel is going to be steel. Could be aluminum, could be plastic. In this case, we have a plastic bumper, and you're not going to get any magnetism anywhere over here. And one thing I also want to check out is the duct tape over here. I want to see what damage was done here. I'm going to peel this back. I'm sure he won't mind. Yeah, that's what I figured. There's a hole here, so that's going to have to get fiberglass and spray painted and everything to fix that. That's a little bit of a pain. That's going to be an expensive fix. And the last thing I like to check for body work and stuff like that is open the door, and right where the door closes, what you want to do is you want to check this seam right there. And what you're looking for is a hard tape line, because when your car gets damaged and they have to respray it, they're going to put a piece of tape on the inside so you don't spray the inside of the car or the weather stripping. So a hard tape line would look just like that. And what you do is you run your finger over it and you'll feel an edge. You could even grab it with your nail. In this case, this edge was just wax. It was able to rub right off. But that's exactly what it would look like. So instead of wax, it'll be dried clear coat or dried paint that'll have a little lip to it. So just roll your finger over the edge just like that, and that's what you want to feel for and look for. Especially it could be in here as well. So just feel around, and in this case, this looks good. Now you want to go to each corner of the car and bounce the car up and down. This is going to check the suspension. It should be firm and it should be hard to bounce. Now if your car bounces around a lot and it's easy to move, just like this Mazda 3 I was checking out, your shocks are bad. It shouldn't be like driving on a trampoline. It should be nice and firm. Also, there should be no squeaks or clunking either, because squeaks and clunking could mean either bushings or ball joints are bad. And you'll feel all of this and listen for all this on the test drive. This is just a quick thing to test. Now let's check the front suspension. With the engine running, turn the steering wheel, and this will give you good access so you can inspect the front end. Now that we can see under the car, go take a look at the strut at the top. While you're inspecting the strut, if you see rust on these coil springs, that means it's bad. Also, if you see any oil leaking out of the strut itself, that also means it's bad. And it just looks like it's wet. It's nice and shiny. In reality, it should be dried, but this is the bad strut. And the strut right there seems to be pretty dry, so it looks good. Next, we want to move downwards, and we want to take a look at the axle boot right here, and the axle in general. So the axle looks nice and straight, and the boot isn't leaking anything, and I don't see any grease anywhere around here, so that's good. And since we're looking at the axle, right to the side here is the brake caliper, and you just want to check over here, and you want to make sure that you don't see any leaks, any brake fluid. And then since we're on the brakes, if we look at these rotors here, these rotors are shot. You can see all the different grooves in them, but we already knew that it needs brakes. And then finally, if we look at the ball joint at the bottom here, that's the ball joint right there. You want to make sure that it's not rusted. You want to make sure that it's not leaking any grease and that's pretty clean. And a lot of these suspension components you'll be checking when you go for a ride, so you'll feel it or you hear it. So that's just a quick way to do an inspection down at the suspension, and just look for any oil, any leaks, any grease, any cracks. So check all 4 wheels. So the last quick thing I want to cover before we go for the test drive is the tire alignment. You want to take a look down the car and see if the tires are tilted inwards or outwards. Sometimes it's easier if we go to the back here. And you really get a good example of negative camber here. So the tire is supposed to be straight down this body line, almost like the front tire. But the rear tire is tilted inwards. So there could be a suspension problem, such as a worn out spring. And another way to check for tire alignment is to look at the treads. I showed you before checking the treads to see how deep they are, but now we want to see if they're all the same depth across. And right away you can see here, look at that. This side has nice tread depth, but the inside here is getting worn down to the belt. So this is going to need new tires. This is getting worn out faster because the contact patch is more on this side of the tire because the tire is tilted inwards, as you could clearly see. So you need to make sure you check the rear alignment and the front alignment on all 4 tires. Alright, and that is what you want to do to inspect the interior as well as the exterior of the car you're looking to buy. In this next and final video of this car buying series, I'm going to go for a test drive and I'm going to show you how I negotiate, and hopefully we get a good price and then drive this car home. I'm also going to show you what to look for on the title to make sure that the car is owned by the person and not a bank. And to get to that video, you could click the screen or find the link in the description below. Hopefully this video was helpful, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing for a new video every week. Stay tuned. The engine's warmed up. It shifts nice. For a 2.5 liter, this thing has pretty good pep.